Welcome to the next section of material for Philosophy 1290 with Phil Veltos. In this section of the course, which experience shows is maybe the hardest material we're going to cover, we're going to look at syllogistic logic, also known as categorical logic, sometimes thought of as ancient logic. And in this first video, which is going to be just an intro to the subject, we're going to look at standard form statements, translating ordinary language into standard form, and then we're also going to look at two-circle Venn diagrams, which are a way of representing visually the logic of categories. So just historically, this logic is attributed to Aristotle, and to the extent to which it's all his own work versus what he gathered up as he was wont to do from the wise people around him in Athens and around the Mediterranean in North Africa and in Persia. We'll never know that, but he's the one with the name on the book, so there he is. And he saw this as an attempt to improve upon the logic that was available to him at the time, which was largely a study of informal fallacies and how to avoid them. The goal he set out is to reduce error by not just having a list of things you should not do, but also to try to properly define good logic. And so this is for the first time we're going to have a system of logic. Those of you who've been frustrated by informal fallacies and how one fallacy can maybe be another, and is it this fallacy? No, it might be that fallacy. It's all imprecise. And for those of us who like things in nice categories, this will be more satisfying. I warn you, though, that the rigor of a system always comes at a cost, and the cost is effort. You will need to think more deeply and clearly about how our language works in order to get this system to work for you. And without I don't want to be negative right off the top here, but this will require some effort on all of our parts. I'll try to put as much effort as I can into making my presentation clear, and you will need to put significant effort into mastering the system Aristotle proposed 2,300 and some odd years ago. So, there's two basic notational forms we're going to use. The first form is to what we call standard form statements. So these are going to be, well, for Aristotle they were Greek, but for us they're going to be English. And we're going to accept voluntarily strict restrictions on how we're going to use language. So instead of it being, anything that's grammatically correct is fine, and maybe even we'll cheat on that a little bit. Instead, we're going to accept very limited form statements. So we call these standard form statements. And we'll talk over those restrictions in a moment. The other notational form we're going to use are these Venn diagrams, which are these three circle diagrams that you've probably seen as in some meme or other, where the circles represent various contrasting things. And usually you can generate a pretty good joke out of them. We'll probably look at some of those before we're done here. So, the standard form statements, I think it's important at all times to keep in mind the goal. We're trying to reduce the opportunity to either accidentally or deliberately make informal fallacies. So all the weirdness about language that creates ambiguity, or all of the jumps from topic to topic that create relevance problems, all the introduced presumptions, Is there a way of confining ourselves in language in a way that reduces that? And Aristotle's proposal is to reduce all statements to categorical statements. What he means is, so each statement describes the relationship between two sets or two categories. So, and we can call those, I think your textbook refers to them as classes. Set, category, class, all are going to describe the same concept here. The only verb we're going to allow is the verb of existence, or to be in English. Also, depending on tense and so on, is, are, and were, past, present, future, and so on. The quantities we're going to describe. And remember, we had all sorts of, fallacies of accent going from some to all, and particular and general. We're going to have 3 possible numbers. And so math and philosophy is really simple. You got all, you've got some, and you've got none. And some could be 1, or it could be nearly all. And so, in fact, we're going to interpret some as at least 1 and be no more specific about number than that. Our statements can be affirmative or negative. They either say, yes, these two sets are interrelated, or no, they are not. And then what else can you say? Nothing. Okay, so these are, right, only one verb, always describe a relationship between class, only uses 3 possible descriptors for numbers, yes or no, that's it. Okay, so these are relatively harsh restrictions on language use. The Venn diagrams, a relatively recent invention. Here with the hipster beard, that would look quite in place down at the Starbucks, if such a store were ever open again. John Venn. And this is the work he's done in around 1880, so 140 odd years ago. And he's describing the logic of set relations visually. So he invents this idea of the overlapping circle. Maybe it was obvious. Maybe he watched kids play with hula hoops. I don't know. But he recognizes that there's something region 2 has that's unique from 1 and 3, in that region 2 describes the intersection of those two sets. So this is a very visual way of representing this logic. So if you're a visual thinker, the Venns are going to be your thing. If you're a super analytical type person, maybe it's going to be the words that are going to work for you. We're going to do both simultaneously in the hopes that whether you're a visual or you're a word person, the one will support your learning of the other. Looking at these diagrams a bit more, this is the insight Venn is trying to understand, which is that for any two sets, if you represent them visually with circles, so that the members of the set are inside and non-members of the set are outside, then any two sets can only have these possible relationships, where one set is completely inside another, so that say a category like female students is entirely within the category of students. Then you could have sets that do not overlap at all. So the set of cats and the set of dogs have nothing in common. And then you can have partial overlap, where you might have, let's say, female students and students in philosophy 1290. Then you would have some students that are not a member of my class. They're over here. Some students are both female students and members of my class. And there are some female students that are not members of my class. Right? So those are the basic set relationships represented visually. We are going to use this standard two-circle diagram to represent all three of those possible intersections. So we're going to use shading to indicate that. So depending on where we put things in this circle is going to represent the three possible combinations. So we will always use this diagram to represent what we're trying to say. That being said, let's go through the standard form statements. Aristotle called these, he gave them each a name, which was the first vowel of the alphabet in his language. And even though this is, 2,300 years ago, things haven't changed that much, so that we have essentially the same vowels. So we're called A, E, I, and O statements. In the first form, A form, this is the expression where it's all, and then whatever subject you wish, are predicates, whatever predicate you wish. And so, for example, all apples are healthy. The A form, the quantity is what we call universal. It refers to everything in the subject. So when we say all apples, we're talking about every apple. Notice we're not talking about all healthy things. We're talking about all apples are members of the set of things that are healthy. The quality, that's the yes or no, is in this case affirmative. Notice that there's no words here that express anything negative. So this is a positive claim that the subject class is a member of the predicate class. The diagram for that looks like this. Now we're going to dogs and mammals here. So if the statement is all dogs are mammals, we're going to scribble out the empty part. So notice my scribbling here. That shows that this region is empty, so that if there was such a thing as a dog, because it can't be in this scribbled out portion, it has to then be in this open portion. It's still inside the set of dogs, but it is also inside the set of things that are mammals. So notice that this basically says there's no dogs that aren't mammals. Every dog must be a mammal. The next form is E form, and this would be, in ordinary language, no subjects are predicates, or no apples are poison. Tell it to Snow White. So we have the quantity is still universal. This is referring to every member, but now it's negative, right? We have a no there. So this is a statement of denial of one class being a member of the other class. And so the diagram looks like this. If we had no bees are mammals, the intersection of bees and mammals, this cat's eye in the middle here, is empty. That's what the scribbling means. And so if there are any bees, they're not mammals. And notice that if there are any mammals, they're not bees. The I form, we're 3 out of 4 now. Some subjects are predicates. So for instance, some students are hardworking. That's you. These are particular. We're talking about some, not all. If it's all, it's universal. If it's some, it's particular. Okay, so we're referring to some of the members of the subject class, and the quality is affirmative. There's no negatives here. So there's an overlap between. So when you say some subjects are predicates, you saying, yes, there is overlap between those sets. And we're going to have to talk about this sum quite a bit yet, because the interpretation we're going to use is at least one. So when someone says lots or many or nearly all or only a few, all of those descriptions for number mean some. At least one. The last form, called the I form. Oh no, sorry. This is still I form. My mistake. This is still number 3. Now we're just looking at the Venn diagram. The X shows that there is at least one. That little X is at least one. I always put exactly one X for every sum, not more. It could be more, but who cares? At least one. So some quadrupeds are mammals. We know that there's lots of things that are quadrupeds. But how many X's do we put here? Not one for every quadruped. That would be a lot of work. You'd need a really big sheet of paper. Instead, you are going to put exactly one X that is both a quadruped and a mammal. There it is. Okay, now we're on the last one. My mistake. So, some subjects are not predicates. So, for instance, some students are not coffee addicts. How many students are we talking about? At least one. Is it lots? Is it a few? Don't know. So the quantity is particular. It refers to some but not all of the subjects, right? So we think that there are some students that are coffee addicts, but we don't know if it's all or not. The quantity is negative. Notice that not there. So some students are not coffee addicts. And so this denies the overlap. So the diagram looks like this. If we had some dogs are not well trained, we would have the circle of dogs and the circle of well-trained things, and there's at least one dog that's not in the well-trained circle. Now, is that perfectly obvious? No, probably not. But the good news is we're going to just cruise right on, but every time we do one of these things, we're going to re-explain it to ourselves so that you see how this works. My strategy here is to get as much of this basic content done quick, and then as we work through the logic problems, we'll just keep hammering on the fundamentals again and again. So, I just want to speak about this word sum a little bit more. So, we mean at least one. And this implies, when I say at least one student is going to pass the course. That means that there is at least one student. Otherwise, it would seem crazy to say that. So, there is some implication here about the existence of things. In our ordinary language today, we talk about things that don't exist. We talk hypothetically. We talk about Superman, even though we know Superman. We might even have extensive debates about how fantastic Superman really is compared to the Flash or somebody, yet we know those are fictional characters that don't actually exist. Our language is quite facile in talking about fictional things. The ancient Greeks, like Aristotle, their language didn't work quite the same way. The Greeks lived in a rich universe. If you can imagine, a god with a great big lightning bolt that'll strike you down or sleep with your mother, or a man with a horse's body and a man's torso, Great. It exists, was how they dealt with that. They spoke of every single thing as if it was real. And so the way our language works and the way ancient Greek language worked, in which this system was developed, is going to cause, there's going to be a little tension here. When we talk about sets and things like all the present kings of France or the female prime minister of Canada, those will be things that don't actually exist, but can still be, correct descriptions. And so it's not like I'm talking nonsense. It's not as if those words have no meaning. And so we're going to need to be careful about this set membership as we proceed. So here's the takeaway. Some always means at least one, but you want to pay some attention to, are you talking about something that actually exists, or are you talking about something that just might exist? So that being said, here's how we might do some translations. I think this is readable. Yeah, okay. So we have a statement. No one is interested in philosophy. Getting that into standard form means we want it to be subject, clear subject and predicate. We want it to be the verb to be, and we want two described sets. So and this is a pretty easy one, but we're gonna say the no people. When we talk about no one, we're talking about the set of people. No people are, and here comes this description of the second set, people interested in philosophy. So that's your predicate, and here's your subject. And then we would say, given that it's universal, it's about all of the subject, and it's negative, we think that's an E form. Next one. Someone is going to win the prize. So there's at least one person, some person is a person who will win the prize. Or if you want to be a little bit cleaner with your words, you might say some person is a prize winner. And it's always nice to be a little bit concise in these matters, even though that doesn't win you any points in the logic game. But you'll see me try to be, clever once in a while as I try to make it not quite so horribly awkward. The awkward way is the technically precise way. The concise way is just a little cleaner. And then so we say once we have some and we have no nots anywhere, then we think that's an I form. The next one, not every poem is a great work of art. So we have some poems are not. We've got to make sure that we always keep our nots. And then the predicate, great works of things that are great works of art. And given that it's particular and negative, we call that O form. Everyone is going to the bar. So that would be all people, everyone, are people who are going to the bar. A form, simple, simple. Okay. A couple things that make these a little bit more difficult are things called direct references. So the first kind of complication we're going to look at. So when you call someone by name or by description, or call a thing by its name or its description. So Ted is going to the lecture. It's tempting to say we're talking about one person. So wouldn't that be some? No, you're talking about all the Teds. With it, whatever context made Ted is going to the lecture unambiguous. I know there's lots of Teds out there. But when someone said this, Ted is going to the lecture, that made sense, which means that Ted is an unambiguous reference in the original statement. So it's talking about one person. So the correct translation is all the people named Ted. Or it could even be, if you really want to be clear here, all people referred to as Ted. Right? So you talk about the reference given in the original statement. All referenced Teds are going to the lecture. But typically we would do this. All people named Ted, or just all Teds, are going to the lecture. And it seems odd to say, why are we talking about all Teds when we mean one? We are talking about all the people referred to in this statement where, this was made in a context that we think was ambiguous. If we were in a group of friends, half of whom were named Ted, then we would have had to have more information here. We would have said Ted Smith rather than Ted Kahn is going to the lecture. So if this is ambiguous, then this is ambiguous, okay? That's how direct references work. You assume it's unambiguous in the initial, and then when you translate it, you're referring to all the things referred to as. And that's direct reference. The other real wrinkle in these translations is the word only. Now, if I was to redesign the English language, or if I was to redesign the legal system, this is the first word I would cut. This causes nothing but grief. And if I was to say, train lawyers, I'd say, you may not make a legal contract that has the word only in it, because no one knows what it means. So the way we use only is highly contextual. Let's look at this example. This is a true statement, by the way. Only American citizens can buy land in Minnesota. What does that mean? You would not translate that as all American citizens are people who can buy land in Minnesota. Instead, you would translate it as all people who can buy land in Minnesota are American citizens. Notice that we have, in effect, reversed the apparent subject and predicate. Dogs are the only animals that fetch. So should we have this reverse when we have the word only in a sentence? Well, when it's the only, we would say all things that can fetch, all animals that can fetch are dogs. When we have the only good car is a Toyota, that's all good cars are Toyotas. Notice the second one reverses and the first one does not. That's mainly because this only business, whether it's in the middle of the statement or at the front, can affect the intended meaning of the sentence. Now, is that super confusing? You bet it is. Could I find a textbook that spends about 5 pages trying to explain it to you? Mr. Copey does a fantastic job of giving you, I think, about 19 rules for figuring out only. I'm not going to make you do that. What my rule for only is stop, drop, and think. Whenever you see the word only, you should be aware that it's possible that the subject could be reversed, right? What appears to be the subject could in fact be the predicate, and what appears to be the predicate could in fact be the subject. So, rule 1 is that stop, be aware of the apparent reversal. And then you would probably want to run both options by yourself and see which one makes sense. So all fetchers are dogs, that makes sense. All dogs are fetchers. Well, if you know at least one dog that doesn't fetch, you realize that doesn't work, okay? The only good car is a Toyota. all good cars are Toyotas. Is it also going to work that all Toyotas are good cars? If we can find at least one that's a piece of junk, not so much. So that's how you handle this. So would this work that all American citizens are people who buy land in Minnesota? Well, clearly not every American citizen is buying land in any particular place. So you have to stop, think, try it both ways if you're not sure. And that's how you translate only. I'm going to give you some practice to do for next time. So I'll let you look at these on your own time. You can pause this and try to translate each one. Okay, so notice that there's some negatives, there's some numbers. We talk about everyone, we talk about negative. Many is many philosophers. How many is that? A few philosophers. So play around with these. At the start of the next video, we will pick up on those. And just to dial up the level of difficulty a little bit, I'll give you some tough ones. So only a few, right? We got only in a couple different places. And then we've got some direct references. So we're talking about the Pope. We're talking about Queen Elizabeth II and Justin Bieber's show. So you want to translate those statements, and then at the start of the next video, we'll check our work. And if you want to do more exercises, sections A and B of chapter 5 of your text, or if you don't have the standard recommended text, then if you find categorical logic or syllogistic logic in any logic textbook that you can get your hands on, you will find standard form translation problems at the start of that section, and I invite you to spend some time with those. That's it. Have a great day.